My fellow Romans, Fortuna has seen fit to bless us with Anno 117 Pax Romana, an adventure that brings you back to the glory days of our empire, which, as you of course know, stretches from fair and sunny Latium to harsh and rainy Albion. And thanks to Ubisoft for collaborating me on this video, I am able to guide you back to the golden days of antiquity already now. Anno 117 Pax Romana is available now on Windows, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S, so make sure to follow my link below to get the game yourself and jump in immediately. Of course, no governor should take the reins of power without a little guidance, so before you set out on your adventure, whether that be as a governor, a tradesman, a general or an admiral, you're going to want to watch this tutorial, as I'll tell you everything you need to know to succeed in Anno 117 Pax Romana. This tutorial is handcrafted for beginners and hopefuls alike, so if you're new to Anno or want a refresher on the most important things to remember, make sure to keep on watching. And remember, leave a like on the video, a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Consider joining the Discord as well to join the community. First of all, Anno lets you play through a campaign that combines a main story with optional missions and what amounts to a sandbox experience where you for the most part can build and expand however you want, while the game's Endless mode drops the main story for a full and classic no strings attached sandbox experience. You can of course get in-game advice in both of these modes, but if you're new to Anno and want that extra framework for your playthrough, I highly advise beginning with the campaign. Second of all, let's quickly go through the basics of the basics. When you begin Anno and you're looking at your beautiful new island, you're going to want to know where you should look and what this UI does. On the top of the screen from left to right, you'll see your total amount of money, your current income at any given point, your total population, and underneath, you'll see your current various types of workforce, but only their availability, so this number will fluctuate as you build or tear down buildings. By clicking your leader portrait, you can check out various stats of your civilization. You may unlock new features for your game with fame points won in-game, and you can check out various accolades you won, kind of like dedicated in-game achievements. On the right side of the portrait is the name of the current town you're viewing, the number to its right is the town level, so number 1 is the lowest and smallest. The cog is so you can open the menu without clicking a button on your keyboard, and below those are specific values for the town you're currently viewing, like its income, population and happiness level, but we later include things like health, danger of fire and so on. On the left side of the screen, you'll find various other menus. The first icon reveals your current missions or quests, which will be very important in the campaign. The second icon reveals urgent notifications like if you're under attack or if your city is on fire. Next, you'll notice 3 locked icons, all of which open up once you've established a larger city, and they reveal your research tree, where you can choose what to research to improve your city, your religion, where you can swear devotion to one god at a time per town for various specific bonuses, and your prestige, which determine how many specialists you may employ in your city. Below that, you can check on your trade routes if you have any, change what you will, cancel them, or create entirely new ones. And finally, we have the Diplomacy tab, where you'll talk to the other factions out there. In the lower left corner, you'll see the minimap in the center, the various available raw materials on the island you're currently looking at, including available river and mountain slots. Below that, you'll find an icon to change provinces when that becomes available later on, a province map where you can see the entire region in much more detail. We have the various game speed options including pause, and the time of day settings which you can change whenever you want to if you crave a certain aesthetic. In the absolute lowest left corner, you'll see the way the wind is blowing to take advantage of your ship's sails. And finally, we have come to the important lower center menu. This is in essence your production interface, and you'll quickly notice that it will expand and become much more complex as time goes on. In the beginning though, it's going to feature your construction sector, where you'll find your basic roads, residences, warehouses and various tools, like the ability to demolish a building, upgrade it or move it. These options can also be viewed easily accessible on the bottom right and left for your convenience. You may also find these easily by simply right-clicking anywhere and then find them on the wheel. You can at any point change the icons on the wheel, by the way, by simply dragging and dropping for the ultimate easy access. Other than the construction sector, you'll see the icons of the various workforces as they appear. In the beginning, that will be the Libertas workforce, and by clicking on the image, you'll immediately see the various buildings and products associated with it. The most basic of the Libertas buildings is the fishing hut, which requires no other production building to function as it catches its own fish, which are ready to be eaten right away. By hovering over the icon, you can see the processing time of the building, what it costs to build, if there are any other requirements to build it, and importantly, the maintenance cost, which in the fishing hut's case is 6 gold per minute. And vitally, 4 workers, in this case, Libertas workers. The same basic demand goes for every building in the game, so you should always be aware of, roughly, how many workers you have to make use of before constructing a new building. The temple icon on the left simply opens or closes the central construction window, and the smaller icon opens the Ornaments tab, allowing you to decorate your towns with non-productive but beautiful ornaments, monuments, and other things of that nature. Similarly, on the right, the ship icon allows you to see all your ships in a region at a glance, and the smaller icon on its right does the same for armies. Lastly, if you have any incoming diplomatic or advice messages, those will pop up in the top left corner, and anything you have currently selected will show in the lower right corner. That was the introduction to Anno's main interface, so by now you should be ready to begin your journey, but do of course feel free to take your time to look around and become more familiar with everything before you continue. In Anno, you begin with virtually nothing but a main trading post, a few basic resources like wood, some gold, and a few early tier workers. Your starting position in this way can be changed in the Endless mode, where you can choose to begin with less or more resources, but your early beginning will in concept remain the same. You begin with your warehouse on the beach, and your first construction should always be a woodcutter that you place in a forest so you can operate at max efficiency, and a sawmill so that you can actually create timber. That's because timber is the most basic material for buildings, and you'll need it to build residences for your people. Of course, what you want to do first, which only costs money, is to build a road between your various buildings and your main trading post, which is always on the beach. However, if your production buildings are too far away from your trading post, which you can see by clicking on the production building and seeing if the green line stretches all the way to it, you can build a warehouse, which will store and distribute resources in its vicinity. And remember again, the most important thing in all of Anno is to always have your buildings, and it doesn't matter which, connected by road, either to your trading post or warehouse, so no matter how you build, your buildings must be joined by road. The main trading post is likely the first place where your people will find and leave their goods. But warehouses actually act as a network, which means that instead of having to take the trip all the way back to the trading port, your people will go to the nearest warehouse for what they need when you have multiple of them. Your people are at the center of Anno 117, because, just like in real life, nothing happens without people and labor. People, however, are not a monolith, but exist in Anno by belonging to different social classes, but all are connected by the title of Workforce. We have begun a game in Latium, which is what you will do in the campaign as well, but is one of 2 options in Endless mode. Anno features different types of workforces depending on where you are. So in Latium, you begin with a number of the Libertas workforce, and by building residences, the Libertas workforce is who you will get more of first. You can of course build housing to attract more people, but if you're lacking in resources, they'll actually stop arriving, and you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you have overbuilt and underdelivered, which means it's time for us to look at workforce needs. Workforce needs simply refers to what your different workforces need in order to not just thrive and grow, but also what they need in order for you to be able to promote them to a higher workforce level. You can find a workforce need by clicking on a house belonging to the workforce of your choice. So a basic residence will always be home to the Libertas workforce in Latium, and this will tell you what they need. You can expand these menus as well to see in detail what they need from each category, including a food need, a public service need, and a fashion need, i.e. clothing. As you can tell, every type of need can be fulfilled from multiple sources, so to keep the Libertas satisfied from food, you can provide only fish or only porridge. It is, however, wise to attempt to fulfill both, as it provides more sources of food should one go missing. But take a look here. If you hover over a need, it will tell you in the tooltip exactly what fulfilling that need does to the residence. For example, having a perfect supply of fish in a Libertas residence provides that residence with 1 more pop and 1 more income, i.e. money. Fully satisfying the porridge need provides no income, but up to 2 more pops, which even though they might not be money, are needed to work. so that you can make more money, build more buildings, and recruit more units down the line. This is how every other need functions as well, so the public service need of the tavern will provide one population and one more happiness value, which is important because you don't want your people to be unhappy, as that can lead to revolts and chaos. And even when a pop is upgraded, you must continue to service their needs to continue maintaining that satisfaction bonus. When you begin the game, you'll start by seeing only a few available needs. However, more advanced needs will unlock as you fulfill the basic ones. So in this way, Anno eases you into the art of slowly but surely making your way into more complex territory. Notice that for the Libertas, every need is either an end product in itself, like the market and the tavern, who importantly need to be close to the residences to have an effect, or they are products that require only one basic raw material to produce. So the spinner making tunics only requires that you have a hemp farm, for example. Remember also that everything in Anno, whether the gathering of raw materials, production of complex goods, the building of a ship or raising of a unit, is produced on a time schedule. For example, a woodcutter produces 1 unit of wood every 30 seconds. However, 1 unit of bread is produced every 60 seconds, and remember that it depends on materials gathered from the wheat farm and the grain mill, both with their own production times as well. If you feel like things are taking a bit longer than they should and you have no time to lose, you can always speed things up by clicking on one of the time values down in the left corner. Also, consider having more raw material buildings for every production building, because that means that when your production is done, your production pops can pick up more raw material as they begin working on the next one. In the beginning of Anno, you're going to want to do 2 things in particular. Gain a larger workforce that can support producing what you need, meaning that your Libertas workforce is prospering and have their needs met, while also making sure that you make money. You begin with a solid coin purse, but your active budget will be in the negative until you manage to stabilize your economy, and you do so exactly by increasing your population and having them be productive, as fulfilling certain needs, like we've seen, increases both. Notice also that certain buildings, like the spinner, actually independently increases the total income of every residence in its area by 1, meaning that you can fulfill a need and get extra money at the same time by building in a residence-dense environment. The same goes for the market, which on its own fulfills a need for residences in its area, while also providing 1 more pop and 1 more income per household. Once you have fulfilled 1 of every need type, your Libertas residence will be able to be promoted or upgraded to a higher tier workforce. For the Libertas, this will mean promoting it to the plebeian workforce, what is essentially the first tier of proper urban production. This is reflected in the plebeians' new needs. So while they too will appreciate a steady supply of fish or porridge to actually satisfy their finer palates, you're going to want to click on their new tab in the construction menu and begin the process of producing bread, which will require wheat farms, grain mills, a charcoal burner that can produce fuel, and finally the bakery, where all of the previous materials will come together to create the end product. Notice now though how the bakery building needs a new type of construction cost to finalize, namely tiles in addition to timber. Tiles is another basic material you'll need for buildings, but in order to create tiles, you'll need clay, and clay can only be extracted from island-specific river slots. You'll also need more charcoal, by the way. This opens up an interesting new reality, because with a new workforce, you must pay attention to who are actually needed for each building. Even though the plebeians are currently the only ones who consume bread and who work in the bakery, you need the basic workforce of the Libertas to actually work the wheat farms. This is perhaps the first point in the game where you're in danger of your ambition running away from you, because notice how the grain mill demands 4 plebeians, how the charcoal burner demands 5 plebeians, and how the bakery needs another 4 plebeians. And this is for just 1 of each building. In other words, before you go ahead and build everything at once, make sure that you have upgraded enough residences to actually sustain an active workforce in your new buildings, because there is little worse than being in the red when it comes to workforce and not having any room to play with. What we have just covered is Anno 117 in a nutshell. You raise buildings, lay down roads, your workforce fills their positions, and the more needs you satisfy by gathering raw materials and turn them into products, you'll unlock the next tier of workforce. Whether we're talking libertas, plebeians, equites, or others, the production chains become more complex, but the concept is the same. And at various points, reaching a larger workforce opens up entirely new buildings and needs, like the governor's villa, the beautiful sanctuary building, the gorgeous theater, or the Roman classic, the aqueduct. I've skipped ahead a bit here, so you'll see what a relatively advanced and mid-game city looks like. Something I haven't mentioned but which you might have noticed already is that the residences will change appearance as well based on their workforce, so the homes of the equites will look a lot more polished and ornamented compared to those of the libertas. However, notice that the equites workforce, in order to be fully satisfied, needs fine brooches. Brooches, however, requires the silver resource and various other buildings. Do you see that little globe icon? That means that the resources required cannot be found in your current province, which means that we are talking about the other province in the game, Albion. In the campaign, Albion unlocks at a certain point in the story, while in Endless mode, if you begin in Latium, Albion will unlock once you've reached a certain civilization size. Albion is the Celtic province in Anno 117, but even though it looks and feels different, the game is of course the same with modifications. First, you'll see that in Albion, your workforce is different. Instead of libertas, you have waiters, who have very similar requirements to the libertas of Latium. However, Albion brings an interesting twist into the mix, because even though the Isles of Albion are mostly habitable and can be cultivated, they also feature a heavy dose of marshland. Even though marshland itself cannot be used for farming, they can be used for Albion-specific buildings, like catching eels for food or gathering reeds for shoes. What's extra fun about Albion is that for the second tier of workforce, you actually get a choice on what type of workforce you want, even though both will unlock a bit later in the game. Here, you get a choice between the Celtic smiths or the Romano-Celtic mercators. The smiths will be able to make Albion-specific wares like cheese, beer, and later drinking horns and ceremonial shields, while the mercators will bring a more Roman influence to the Isles, through among other features, proper bread and Roman schools. However, the mercators will also be able to make brooches out of silver. And remember what it was that our equites back in Latium wanted? That's right, brooches. In other words, this is how you may satisfy the needs of a workforce in one province by making a workforce in another actually produce it. But once you have produced silver brooches, how do you get them to your equites in Latium when they're made in Albion? Well, this is when we get to the topic of trade, both intra and intra-provincial. And to begin that kind of trade, you need ships. If you don't have one already, ships are built from your shipyard, a coastal building that will unlock when you've reached a certain city milestone. At the shipyard, you can build a selection of civilian or warships, although the more advanced ones need you to unlock them in the research tree first. Like a building, ships also require both construction and maintenance costs, so the basic civilian ship, which is decent for trading in the beginning, only demands 3 of the most basic workforce. However, since Anno features possible hostile and raider factions, using military ships for trade with increased attributes is not a bad idea either if you can afford it. Once your ship is ready, setting up a trade route is easy as mud pie. You can either click on your ship and then click Create a Trade Route, or you can head to the left panel and then click Trade Routes. From there, you select the islands you wish a trade route should include. Then, depending on the cargo space of your ship, you may add any resource to load onto it, preferably one you actually have in stock, and then you choose where you wish to unload the goods. Then, if you haven't added a ship or more already, you can do that up here, adding the ships of your choice. If your trade networks are located on different provinces and not just different islands, you can click on a settlement in one province, then go to the top to change provinces, and then click on the settlement or settlements you wish to visit in the other. When everything is ready, click Establish Route and your trade ships should be good to go. Now remember that the longer between your destinations, the longer it will take for the route to complete and begin again. This is not just one trade, but the route continues until you stop it or until you have been stopped by enemies. You can also customize the ship's behavior settings so that you, for example, wait at a port for all the goods to be present before it continues on. And if you're doing a trade from Albion to Latium or otherwise, you can check on your route on the global marble province map. This is how you'll transfer materials or process goods from one island to another, the exact same concept, but with different materials when the situation demands it. Trading with yourself and your own routes is one way of doing it, but sometimes you'd like to either buy or sell goods from other factions too, especially if you find yourself in need and if you have the money to spare. This is especially useful if you're really lacking a need that your workforce requires in order to maintain itself, because if you're running a big operation and you're suddenly short on something, that can have a cascading effect that sees more and more people leave. In order to buy or sell what you need then, you can do so at your trading post or at a warehouse. There you'll see all the possible different goods in the game, and by clicking on one at a time, you can choose how you wish to approach each good, or you can set a general approach as well. In this scenario, I've experienced that I need a bunch more cockles and eels than what I can produce myself, so I have elected to set my trading post to buy cockles when my stock is below 20 and eels when my stock is below 30. You will of course only be able to purchase these in this way when trading ships come by and stop at your port, and the ships won't necessarily provide you with everything you need at once, but each trade is at least automatically done when a ship arrives. If you want to be a bit more proactive about things, you can always send a ship to a foreign trading port yourself and see what kind of goods they have in stock for you to trade, which you then can load onto your ship and send to the port of your choice. Setting up a trade frame report like this may be done for any good in the game, but remember that they cost money to purchase, so if you're out of money, you're kind of out of luck as well. You can of course sell goods as well if you're currently overproducing it, which is a good way to help keep your economy above water and your factories running. And remember, trade becomes so important in the mid to late game exactly because of needs like the one of the Equites, which means that in order to keep them happy, you need to continuously send goods where they're needed from where they are made. In this way, while trade may seem complicated, it's actually really straightforward in theory. But you must remember that their efficiency will always depend on the availability of goods at your ports, so whether they can actually pick up what you've told them to, and their safety, meaning that if pirates or other factions take your fleet out, nothing will be delivered at all. So let's talk a little about your armies, navies, and warfare, because strategy is also a part of Anno 1.17. At one point in the game, when you've managed to become advanced enough, you'll be able to unlock the harbor buildings like the shipyard and military buildings like the barracks. Like we have covered already, the shipyard is where you recruit warships, who may be outfitted the way you want based on your unlocked research. But units are recruited at the barracks. Units come in several shapes and sizes, but only some are available everywhere. The auxilia and archer units, for example, are available in both Albion and Latium, and require not just money and weapons to recruit, but also a cool 44 libertes, or Albion's waiters, to race. While Albion gives you the option to recruit axemen, who are taken from the available smith workforce, Latium provides you with the ability to recruit legionaries once you have unlocked them in the research tree. But they require the armor resource as well, and demand both 6 libertes and 44 plebeians. That means that even for your army, you're going to want to pay attention to your population and available workforce, since every soldier is taken directly from it. Managing ships and units work mostly the same way. You can select one or multiple at a time. Clicking on a spot on the map will make them move there if possible, but if you have more than one selected, you can also choose to have them move in formation by dragging a line they will all line up with. You can also ask your units and ships to patrol a certain route, so they will attack or defend any hostile or friendly units respectively if they enter that zone. And just like movement, warfare works essentially the same way, namely by selecting units and clicking on the enemy. For armies, it's possible to create individual formations too by using the Move in Formation button while having multiple units selected. If you want several formations to move in formation at the same time, you can simply drag across all your units and click on the location you want, and they will move in the formation they were placed in originally. Since archers and ships, i.e. long-range units, have a radius in which they can fire, they will automatically fire if a hostile force moves within their range, but you'll of course have to manually click on an enemy if they are outside that range if you want to attack, or of course you can sit back and relax if the enemy is met on a patrol route you have set. Invasions are also an integral part of Anno, as you'll need a combination of ships and units to take or defend the various islands in the game. A unit can be loaded onto a ship simply by having a unit selected and then clicking on the ship of your choice, after which they will be counted as cargo, and even though you can select troop by troop and click on nearby land to disembark, you can also click disembark all units at once, and then target nearby land to unload all units at the same time. Remember that when a unit is gone or has been defeated, the workforce you spent on that unit will be replenished in the city they were raised, allowing you to raise another should you wish to do so. Lastly, to defend your lands when you're not actively partaking in warfare, Anno allows you to raise walls and towers to protect what matters most. When you've unlocked this feature, you'll be able to use money and timber to raise wooden walls, but if you want to include a gate to enter and exit safely, or the archer towers that will actually fire at enemies, you'll also need not just weapons, but manpower, in other words the Libertas workforce. It is through the research tree that you can upgrade your various buildings or features in Anno that cannot be achieved elsewhere. So if you want stone walls instead of wooden ones, you'll have to research it first. In fact, the research tree, which is quite massive, reveals a bunch of crucial advances you'll want to truly succeed in Anno, but what you want to get first depends on your strategy and goals. Research is divided into economic, civic, and military, so while economic will open up opportunities in the realm of production, resource gathering, and workforce, civic research will improve the life of your workforce or certain urban buildings, and even open up new gods for you to worship. And finally, military research will improve your war-making capabilities, including unlocking entirely new units and defensive buildings. The speed at which you research is determined by your accumulation of the knowledge resource, which you'll get from sources like buildings, festivals, and certain products. Because Anno doesn't really begin violently, it can be wise to begin to focus on economic or civic issues, so as to create a financial and production foundation before you begin recruiting units and researching for warfare purposes. Similarly, when you unlock religion and gods, as we briefly touched upon earlier, make sure to spend some time thinking about what your island needs the most. Each island of a certain size may worship their own god, thus providing them devotion, which in turn increases the productivity of various parts of society. So while worshipping Ceres improves the productivity of your food-making product chains, Neptune will improve food productivity in buildings related to the sea. Mars will increase your weapon and armor production, and so on, and each comes with special bonuses once you've crossed certain milestones. In other words, paying attention to both research and your religion is key to maximizing productivity. You can always change who your islands are devoted to if you need to change it on a whim, or you can change your research or the order in which you have lined them up. Another aspect working alongside your workforce is the factors of danger of fire, disease, or violent uprisings. These can be managed to a big extent by City Watch buildings, so the Fire Watch, a City Guard, and the Medicus, and you'll have to build multiple of these in larger cities because they only have an effect in certain areas. The final aspect we'll cover in this tutorial is diplomacy. Diplomacy is what happens when there are multiple known factions in the same game, and even though diplomacy begins kind of non-existent, it'll become important over time. Some factions you'll be at war with, and others will be neutral, but by going to the diplomacy menu, you can check out the status of each of your relations, which by a symbol will show you your current main status, so if you're in an alliance, peace, or at war. In terms of relations with the Emperor, that is determined by a respect factor that will go up or down based on your actions and will grant you various bonuses or malices along the way. If you wish to see how you're doing compared to the others, click on their portrait and you'll see a full but simple comparison chart, which hopefully helps you determine if there's someone you want to piss off or not. Click on the Enter Negotiations button and you'll see your current treaties, ranging from alliances and trade treaties to limited or all-out wars. You are limited in your choices based on relations and research, so remember that before you dive into diplomacy with a character. Remember though, that wars especially can toss a wrench into your systems, and you do well to pay attention to who you are fighting and where on the map they are located, because the AI is active in trying to undermine you when they have reason to. In this way, settling islands is not just a way to gather more resources and create a bigger civilization, but it's also a way to prevent competitors from doing the same and utilizing that increased tax base to attack you later on. And speaking of diplomacy, I suppose it's worth mentioning that some characters on the map are not technically factions, but special characters you can interact with in various ways. In the campaign, for example, the character of Diana, who unlocks at a certain point, is not a part of the faction list. She does, however, control her own island, and you can send ships to trade with her. Sometimes she will even give you missions, and in order to interact with those, you usually send your ship to her location, then when close enough, click on her harbor building to interact. Notice also that several of these non-faction leaders also have their own ships for sale sometimes, which is a quick and easy way to increase the size of your navy, although you must of course pay the big bucks for this. Characters will also have lighthouses which serve as quest givers, allowing you to take on certain odd jobs or deliveries in return for rewards like gold or special items, like specialists, who you can put in your government mansion to improve various conditions on your island of choice. And that, my friend, was a grand introduction to Anno 117 Pax Romana, and I dare say the only tutorial you need to get started and become familiar with the game. Anno 117 Pax Romana is now available, so make sure to follow my link below and buy the game yourself on Ubisoft Connect, Steam, Epic Game Store, PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X and S. I sincerely hope you found this tutorial helpful, but if there's anything I have yet to touch upon or if you have any other questions, make sure to leave a comment below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like as well, and of course, subscribe to the channel and consider joining as a supporting member as well. Join the Discord too to talk to me and other friends whenever you want to. The link is below. Thank you so much for watching, thank you so much to Ubisoft for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!